Hey, what's good with the YouTube, man? It's your boy Rojo, and this is the Rojo Room. Today we're going to talk about a situation, Drew Street, Los, Northeast Los, part of the Avenues. We're talking about a situation about some stuff that went down back in the days, man. It's really interesting, man. It has something to do with hustling, and ultimately telling, all kinds of stuff, man. So check it out. Francisco Real killed people. He smuggled illegal immigrants. He sold drugs, and he collected taxes for the big homies. He ran a gang, a family criminal enterprise that made his street in Glassell Park one of the most dangerous in L.A. But L.A. being the city of reinvention, last week, Real emerged in federal court in a white jumpsuit, shackled at wrist and ankles. He received a 10-year prison term from U.S. District Court Judge George Wu, his reward for years of testifying against his family and partners in crime. Real contributed to bringing down a tremendous drug business and gang grip on a neighborhood, said Charles Brudman, the federal prosecutor in Real's case. It's an amazing story. The sentencing of Francisco Pancho Real closes a sweeping L.A. gang family saga, which stretched from the humid, fruit-growing lands of Guerrero, Mexico, to the broken sidewalks of a neglected two-block strip, northeast L.A., known as Drew Street. In the late 1960s, two brothers, Flocelo and Robistiar Aguirre, arrived from Tlaochapa, Guerrero, the seat of a county with a population of 11,000. It's part of a poor and violent farming region in Mexico known as the Tierra Caliente, the hot land. The Aguirre brothers found work at Van de Kamp's Bakery at San Fernando Road and Fletcher Drive in Glassell Park and supplied baked goods to a string of Dutch-themed coffee shops. The brothers found housing a few blocks away in an apartment on Drew Street, which was then a tidy, working-class neighborhood, rising up a hill toward Glendale's Forest Lawn Cemetery. The Aguirre's hard work gained them the esteem of the bakery foreman, and soon they were foremen themselves. By the 1980s, men and women from their neighborhood in Mexico were streaming up for jobs at Van de Kamp and housing on Drew Street. In the late 80s, the regional apartment boom transformed Drew Street. City planners let developers raise houses and put in dense apartments, but without including open space. 36 homes were replaced by hundreds of apartment units, adding 1,500 people to 6 square blocks. The poorly considered new density, combined with the departure of manufacturing and union jobs, mangled the neighborhood. LA city leaders and planners were unprepared when the new apartments filled with poor people from Mexico and surrounding areas. Among them was Maria La Chata Leon, an urchin who sold popsicles back home. And his first job in America included babysitting for Van de Kamp's workers. At first, the Avenues gang used Drew Street to sell drugs, knowing the immigrants would stay quiet. By the late 1990s, the immigrant kids were replaced with traditional cholos as the force on the street, and the Avenues, Drew Street clique rose. The street collapsed into a crack and gang-ridden hell that grew from the Tlachapan immigrants' insular world, and in the 1980s, apartment fortresses the gang dominated. Maria Leon had 13 children with 4 different men. And by the early 2000s, several of her sons became her power base, sustaining the Leon family's drug dealing and immigrant smuggling business. 6 of her sons, Francisco Pancho Real and his brother Nicholas Real, Jose Leon, and Danny Leon, as well as Randy Martinez and Jesus Martinez, formed the gang's nucleus. They were joined by cousins and distant relations from a dozen extended Tlachapan families, a strange hybrid of Mexican hillbillies and LA gang culture. Maria Leon and her children ran operations from their home, known as the Satellite House, because of the satellite TV dish in the driveway. City agencies began spending big money on Drew Street to fight what city planners had helped create. Crews trimmed trees on Drew once a year instead of every 5 to get Los Angeles police sight lines up the hill where the gang lived in apartment buildings were crammed side by side. Police officers drove up Drew Street with no less than 2 cars at a time. Numerous LAPD gang unit operations seemed to fail. Francisco Real grew into a leader and shot caller of the Drew Street clique. Rich, big psycho Aguirre, a Mexican mafia killer who ran Drew Street's criminal enterprises from solitary confinement at Pelican Bay State Prison, anointed Francisco in 2007. Real said in a testimony in his 2010 trial that he was a reluctant shot caller. He had joined the Drew Street gang in 2004, he testified, to be free to sell drugs. But he was there for N.E.L.A when he had to be. Once, while in Placita Olvera downtown, N.E.L.A shot caller phoned and told Real that a guy they wanted dead was in the park off Drew Street. He and another homeboy went and gunned down Frank Kiko Cordoba. Then Real testified he went to a gathering of his wife's family. 3 years later, the Mexican mafia called him again. They needed somebody to collect taxes from local drug dealers, somebody stable, to replace the 2 tax collectors who'd been arrested, he testified. Real didn't want to do the job, but he couldn't refuse. Turned out he was good at it. As a N.E.L.A tax collector, he discovered he had to be more about having brains to collect the money and not to steal from them. Once you're collecting money, you're not allowed to gangbang because you're messing with the money that's going to Pelican Bay. Soon he was running through a half a dozen cell phones a month, directing a tax collecting crew of 3 guys. And you could see him standing in his front yard and directing every single thing that happened in the neighborhood, a prosecutor said in a recent interview. By then, Real testified the Drew Street gang was involved in drugs, extortion, tax collecting, gun trafficking, and smuggling of illegal immigrants, many of whom would work off their debts by selling crack. In February of 2008, in a dramatic street shootout with LAPD that closed down local schools and dozens of arrests, making headlines throughout California, Francisco's half-brother, N.E.L.A, was killed in the very streets he had terrorized. That day, after Leon and 3 others in the car shot and killed a Cypress Park gang member who was walking with his stepdaughter, LAPD undercover officers responded. A minute later, Leon emerged from a car with an assault rifle. His death and the thunderous shootout that followed marked the beginning of the end of the Real Leon crime enterprise. That June, LAPD, backed by a massive RICO indictment, swept the neighborhood of 70 gang members. A community policing effort followed to rid Drew Street of trash and graffiti and revive residents' confidence in city authorities. In 2009, another 88 Avenues members were indicted. Los Angeles City Attorney got a court ruling to demolish the satellite house as a community nuisance. Once the cleared land, city leaders installed a community garden. Today, Maria Leon and several of her children are in prison. Vegetables grow where the family once built a shrine to Jesus Malverde, the patron saint of Mexican drug traffickers. Once in jail, Francisco Real turned state's evidence time after time. He deciphered for cops the puzzling code of gang conversations taken from wiretaps and testified his own in 5 cases, all to earn his way out of a possible life sentence. Those that figured Rafael Stomper Carrillo and Jose Rival Gomez were in the car with N.E.L.A the day LAPD shot him down. Real may testify again against Gomez, a close childhood friend who he long called his cousin. Gomez faces death row for allegedly killing his cellmate inside the L.A. County Jail. Pancho Real will be out in just 4 years under the 10-year sentence handed down by Judge Wu. He's been in custody since 2008, all counting his time served. Excuse me. He'll live in protective custody behind bars. His crime boss mom and some siblings have disowned him. The Mexican mafia has green-lighted him for assassination. In a more unusual move, N.E.L.A has placed a bounty on his head, prosecutors said. Real will be free in 2018, but in the worst way. Well, that's a little bit about something that went down in the Avenues, man. That's crazy. The Avenues, very respected, very, very with the business. No doubt about it. You know what I'm saying? They've been doing their thing for a long time. They're established. Ain't nobody telling them it's nothing. You know, I met a couple of them guys, and they were solid as they come. But yeah, that's just a little story about that family. I found that interesting. That man, she had so many kids, and they were all very, very involved at the highest levels in the neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? But hey, this is just a little something quick for Saturday, y'all, man. This is your boy Rojo. This is the Rojo World. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, y'all.